What will Amrit Kal look like? India in 2047. A vision for the future. The freedom debate. Shashi Tharoor versus Jayant Sinha.
Hello and welcome, friends, to this very special event in the 77th Independence Day week of India, a week where we bring you the Freedom Idea of India debate, being brought to you on India Today television in partnership with India's international movement to unite nations. And we are here at the Bhavan's Auditorium in front of a wonderful young audience in Mumbai with two eminent guests who I want to introduce in a moment. Please give a loud round of applause to Jayant Sinha, Bharatiya Janata Party, Member of Parliament, former minister, and an extremely distinguished parliamentarian. To my right is another very distinguished parliamentarian. He's worn several hats over the years. He's here, of course, in his hat as an eminent speaker. Please welcome Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Thiruvananthapuram MP of the Congress Party. So, two of the finest speakers that we have in Parliament, and we hope that they will illuminate us on their idea of India for this young audience that has assembled here. Please give yourselves a big hand, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so it's going to be 2 minutes each first, asking both of you, Jayant Sinha and Dr. Tharoor, to tell us what is your idea of India as we enter this 77th Independence Day week. Why don't you start, Jayant Sinha?
Thank you very much, Rajdeep. And first of all, let me start by thanking all of you and IIMUN for organizing this debate and putting together a fantastic event. So thank you very much for having us. Thank you, of course, Rajdeep, for anchoring this debate. And of course, a very warm welcome to my distinguished colleague in Parliament, Shri Shashi Tharoor. I have a very clear view. As we think about India in 2047, 100 years after independence, I think of a global superpower that's driving sustainable prosperity for ourselves, for India, and for the world. Sustainable prosperity by 2047, that's how I think about India 100 years after independence. The two words here that are very important are prosperity and sustainability. Prosperity and sustainability. So when I say prosperity, I mean that by 2047, we end poverty in India. And when we end poverty in India, all of our regions do well. Mumbai does well, Thiruvananthapuram does well, and my own Hazaribagh in Jharkhand does well. So we have regional growth, we have regional prosperity, and that's a very important element of prosperity. The second aspect of prosperity, which I think is very important for all of us, is to have a very strong safety net. And that includes, of course, healthcare, income support, pensions, education. We need to build that. We've done wonderful work on that over the last few years, which I will describe in detail later. But a strong safety net is very important for prosperity. And then the third, which hopefully all of you as young people will appreciate, I certainly appreciate in my own life, is a world-class, wonderful education system that's available to all. So when we talk about prosperity, we talk about those three things. We talk about end to poverty, high GDP per capita, we talk about a strong safety net, and we talk about a world-class education system. Now let me come to the second aspect of what sustainable prosperity means, and that revolves around the concept of sustainability. For us to genuinely have sustainable prosperity, it has to be based on the foundation of a rock-solid constitutional democracy. A rock-solid constitutional democracy, that is the foundation for sustainability. And if we have that kind of constitutional democracy, we will of course be able to get to net zero, because that's what we need to do. Our planet faces an existentialist crisis when it comes to climate change. We have to be on a net zero trajectory. We have to be in ecological balance. That's a very important aspect of sustainability. And the third important aspect of sustainability is to have a sophisticated, high-tech military as well, a military that can guard our borders, that can give us security in these very uncertain times. So we are living, and as the Honorable Prime Minister said, the Amrit Kal, the next 25 years will define India. We are very well positioned, a young, healthy workforce, which is what you are, a solid, rules-based democracy, and geopolitics that are very much in our favor now. That's why we need to build an India that is sustainable, an India that is prosperous. That's my vision for India in 2047.
Jayant Sinha with his vision for India. Dr. Shashi Tharoor, 2047, your idea and vision for India. Jayant Sinha says we are entering Amrit Kal. Respond.
Well, look, I mean, I just hope we stay out of Andhakal, but that's another matter. I do say that I don't disagree with anything Jayant has said in terms of his vision for the future. But my idea of India starts at the basics, which is the idea of an inclusive country. You remember when partition happened in 1947, we didn't divide on ideology. It wasn't communists on one side and capitalists on another, like the North and South Vietnam or North and South Korea or East and West Germany. It wasn't geography either. It wasn't North on one side and South on another. We were partitioned on the basis of one simple principle: should religion be the determinant of our nationhood? And those who said, yes, our religion defines our nationhood, they went off and created another country called Pakistan. And those who remained in India, which included all our great freedom fighters, Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, Maulana Azad, Dr. Ambedkar, you name them all, they all said, no, we have struggled for everybody, and we will create and build and sustain a country for everybody. And so in that process, they wrote a constitution for an inclusive India. An India where it doesn't matter, what language you speak, what religion you profess or don't, what your color of your skin is, which part of the country you're from. It shouldn't matter, because it doesn't. You all have the same rights under the Indian Constitution. That's the idea of India that really matters to me, that we may have differences of caste, of creed, of color, of culture, of cuisine, of costume and custom, and maybe even consonant and conviction, but we still rally around a consensus. And that consensus is on the simple democratic idea that in a large, diverse country like ours, you don't really need to agree all the time, so long as you will agree on the ground rules of how you will disagree. And to my mind, this is what has sustained India, Indian democracy, and the hopes of India until very recently, when some in authority have been challenging the very basis of this idea, who see in India through a much narrower prism of one religion, one language, one leader, who are anxious in that process to demonize and other with a capital O on the basis of their religion, on the basis of their caste, even weaponizing history to try and rake up wounds in the present, which we don't need to see reopened in the kind of future that Jayant and I would like to imagine for our country. I too want an India where, frankly, we can all dream of a decent job, a place, a healthcare clinic within a 5-kilometer walk maximum, less maybe, from our places of residence, a school to send our children to, 2 or 3 square meals a day, a shelter from the rain and the sun, and a decent job that enables us to dream of a better life and even still of having a better life for our children. We all want to give you, the next generation, a better India. But we are, unfortunately, in the process of dividing and damaging and wounding the India that exists. That is what saddens me so much. Everything Jan said is fine. I think we really need to use a modern metaphor, we need to concentrate both on the hardware of development, the ports, the roads, the airports, the highways, the railways, all of that, and also the software of development, which is the people, the education system, sanitation, healthcare, and above all, invest in all our people being together. To do that, we must focus on what unites us, not what divides us. If we can dream the same dreams together with our eyes open, we can take India into a glorious 2047. Thank you very much.
In some ways, Dr. Tharoor has set the stage for a political debate. Because in the last few weeks and months, we've seen what's happened in Manipur. You were debating this in the no confidence motion in Parliament. Tribes are pitted against tribes. Meiteis are pitted against Kukis. Lands are divided. Kukis cannot come into the Imphal Valley and Meiteis cannot go into the hills of Manipur. We've seen a terrible hate crime, Mr. Sinha, not too far away from here in Mumbai, where 3 people were killed by a person in an alleged hate crime because they belonged to a particular religion. In this case, they were Muslims who were killed. And we've seen in Nuh, in Haryana, the very opposite taking place, where Hindus have been killed, mainly in a predominantly Muslim area. So should we be worried before we think of 2047 and Amrit Kal, think about where we are in 2023 is what Dr. Tharoor seems to suggest. Is it as bad as he says, or is he exaggerating because he's in the opposition party?
So Rajdeep, I don't want to put words in Shashi ji's mouth or anything, but let me make it very, very clear that he and I think all of you, have sworn an oath to our Constitution. We have said on our sacred honor that we will protect and cherish our Constitution. And our Constitution is very, very clear. The idea of India that comes through our Constitution and in our constitutional morality is very clear. And all of you in your civics classes and in your studies of the Constitution know Article 14, Article 19, all of these very important aspects of the Constitution. And let me make it absolutely crystal clear. Our party, the Honorable Prime Minister, the Honorable Home Minister, all of them have again and again assured everybody that we absolutely cherish the ideals of the Constitution, which of course include secularism, federalism, protection of human rights, the rule of law, accountability. All of these are enshrined in our Constitution. We've sworn oath of our sacred honor to the Constitution, and we will defend it, and we will make sure that we are able to bring it to everybody in this wonderful republic of ours. Nobody should have any fear or any concern about it. What you have just spoken about, the various incidents, Rajdeep, that you mentioned, they're terrible incidents. They're tragic incidents. And nobody should have to suffer. Nobody should have to go through that. As parliamentarians, as representatives of the people, Shashi ji and I deal with these kinds of situations every single day. We're dealing with them every single day. And I will tell you that all of us are determined to make sure that everybody in India, independent of their religion, their caste, their creed, their color, all our citizens get all the rights and opportunities that they deserve as members of this republic. We are all committed to that, first and foremost as Indians and citizens. Our ideology, our parties, all of those things come after that. But first and foremost, we are committed to that as citizens of this Republic of India, which is just about to celebrate its 77th day of freedom. And I'll conclude by saying one thing. The most important thing about a constitutional democracy, and I said this when I started, is the idea of freedom. It's the idea of liberty. And liberty means freedom of many different kinds. They're enunciated in Article 19. Of course, freedom of religion is part of it. Freedom of expression is part of it. Freedom of association is part of it. Freedom of commerce is part of it. Freedom, freedom, freedom. That is the essence of democracy, and a government's first and most important right and responsibility is to be able to protect the Constitution, to protect liberty and freedom.
Before I go to Dr. Tharoor as a response, just want to, since you mentioned freedom so many times, you mentioned swearing on the Constitution, are you telling me therefore that every Indian, every young Indian can choose who he or she wants to marry without being accused of love jihad? That they can choose to eat the food of their choice without being told that if you eat a particular kind of meat, you might be seen as anti-Indian? Are we very clear about that, that young India should have the right and the freedom to practice their lives the way they want?
Rajdeep, I think...
You took away my line, boss. This is what I was going to say.
Will politicians stay out of our kitchens? Will politicians stay out of our personal lives?
Exactly.
Allow us to lead our personal lives as per the Constitution.
Thank you, Rajdeep, for asking that question. And let me assure all my young friends today, all the things that you mentioned are your constitutional rights. They are your constitutional rights. We fought for hundreds of years to be able to secure those rights. Those have come to us from our freedom fighters, from our grandparents, from our parents, and they have fought very hard and struggled so that we can say yes to all the things, Rajdeep, that you just said. Yes, you have the right to marry anyone you want. Yes, you have the right to eat anything you want. Yes, you have the right to practice any religion you want. That is enshrined in our Constitution, and anybody who says the opposite is going against our Constitution.
Okay. It's good to get that kind of straight response. Of course, as a journalist, I would be cynical of politicians because they say something at platforms like this and then something else happens in the real world out there. But Shashi Tharoor, the argument could be, stemming from what Mr. Sinha said, that you're fear-mongering. You see, you come from a lovely state like Kerala where people live in harmony. And yet there is a sense that perhaps when you today say that you're worried about whether the diversity of this country is being protected enough, are you fear-mongering? No. Again, because you believe that the BJP is a majoritarian party and our politics is so badly divided and polarized that two of you may be friends, but once you're out there in the political field, you become enemies.
Yeah, I don't think that Jayant is necessarily representative of many, many people, both amongst his party leaders and their fellow travelers from associated organizations in the Sangh Parivar. When he speaks of freedom, to me the most fundamental freedom guaranteed by the Constitution is the freedom to choose. To choose, of course, your own political representation, your own political destiny, but also to choose where you want to live in this country, who you want to love and how you want to love, what you want to eat, how you want to dress, where you want to work. These are all fundamental freedoms which very many people, not from my side of the political divide, but from another side, have chosen to try and abridge. I want to keep the government out of the bedroom. I want to keep the government out of the kitchen. I want to keep government away from the dining table. But that's not, unfortunately, what we've seen from many people associated with the ruling party. And this remains a very fundamental challenge because there are a whole bunch of people who are feeling othered. Sadly, I'm not fear-mongering. I am reflecting what I hear every day from families saying we're going to send our kids abroad and we hope they never come back. I've had let me name it, a very prominent Muslim television anchor with a Hindu husband told me almost in tears that her 7-year-old son playing downstairs in his building was told, my parents say I can't play with you because you're a Muslim. What has our country come to? This is not fear-mongering. This is shame awakening. This is not India. We can't afford to be like this. We absolutely must once again restore the values that Jayant is rightly celebrating and applauding, and I also celebrate and applaud. We have to create a country which is really an India for every Indian, irrespective of their background, their faith, or anything else.
I hope this young audience is convinced about that you will not discriminate on the grounds of caste, gender, and religion. Are we clear about that? Okay, that's reassuring to hear. I just want to pick up, though, from that to another concern that young India might have, which is income inequalities, which have grown. An Oxfam report says that the top 30% in this country owns over 90% of India's wealth. And the top 10% own over 72% of the wealth. And the richest 5%, about 62% of the wealth. Jayant Sinha, as a man of finance, as a man who comes from Hazaribagh, one of the poorer parts of the country in Jharkhand, is this something that worries you? One worry has been pointed out by Dr. Tharoor, religious divisions. The other is income inequality. Is that a challenge going ahead, looking into 2047?
Rajdeep, in the last few years, we've virtually ended extreme poverty in India, and that's what many, many international observers are saying right now. The Honorable Prime Minister, in his very eloquent speech yesterday, laid out a number of statistics that indicate that we made remarkable progress in ending poverty and ending the markers of poverty, which is lack of access to education, lack of access to healthcare, hunger. As you know, through the COVID pandemic and thereafter, we have been providing free grains to 80 crore people. So we have been able to provide, which has never been done before. This is very important for young people to understand. This has never been done before, that we can now provide support, sustenance into people's bank accounts and through the public distribution system directly into their homes in a way which has never been accomplished before, because we've been doing it so efficiently. So we've ended extreme poverty. We have been able to create job opportunities. We've been able to provide good education to young people. So we are rapidly creating opportunities for everyone. So of course, income inequality is reducing. Income inequality is something that we are working on. And across the world, there are important forces at work that actually make it difficult to be able to deal with the concentration of wealth that is happening. And those are driven by globalization, they're driven by technology and so on. This trend that you're talking about the very narrowing and concentration of wealth at the very top, not even the 1%, but the 0.001%, is driven by certain very dramatic global factors, as I said, like globalization and technology, which we are subject to like everyone else. But the important point, that for India's 140 crore people, we have created a safety net. That is something that has never ever been done before in a country at the scale and scope that India has accomplished over the last few years.
So you deny that there is concentration of wealth. You're saying people have been lifted from poverty, which is fair enough. And it's not. It's happened not just in the last 9 years. Let's also be fair. It's been happening over the last 29 years post-liberalization. But you agree that there is too much of concentration of wealth in a few hands even today in this country?
I don't subscribe to that, Rajdeep, because if you look at the number of unicorns that have been created, the number of millionaires and billionaires that have been created, those numbers are staggering, those numbers are extraordinary. So I don't subscribe to the view that we have this very incredible concentration at the top. I think that there is a rising tide that's lifting all boats.
Well, I don't agree with that, Rajdeep, as you can well imagine. First of all, under the UPA government, of which in the second term I was a part, we pulled out, and these are not challenged figures, 270 million people from below the poverty line above it. Sadly, during the demonetization carried out by Jayant's friends in government, we ended up pushing 150 million people back down again below the poverty line, with a number of lakhs and lakhs of micro and small enterprises shutting down because their liquidity disappeared overnight, and most of them never reopening. You also found a situation where the highest figures for unemployment ever recorded since we started keeping numbers in the late 1930s happened 2 years ago in this country. The COVID lockdown didn't help either, and the way in which our migrant workers suffered trudging barefoot or in slippers back to their home villages because the lockdown had been announced with no warning, the only country in the world where no warning was given. So there was no time for any arrangements to be made to house or feed our migrant workers. They all went back in terrible circumstances. When we look at these situations, people being treated callously, decisions being made that impacted the poor and the poorest of the poor, unemployment going up so people don't have the hope of something better, and at the same time, inflation has been recorded. We've seen, all of you, I'm sure, have been hearing stories about the price of tomatoes. For even longer, we've been hearing about the rising prices of fuel, petrol and diesel, even when they were plummeting around the world because our government was piling taxes on top of it to cover their costs. All of this has made life very difficult for the so-called Aam Aadmi. Now, the macro picture, I don't disagree. Unicorns may well be created. We probably created far more than any other country, I think. But the fact is, those are unicorns because they're $1 billion worth, each of them. How many Indians do you think? 0.0000, how many percent? So we're not looking at anything that helps the large mass of people, the average Indian, the so-called Aam Aadmi.
You know, but I must say this to you, Dr. Tharoor. It's not as if the price of tomatoes only rose when the BJP is in power.
They rose more.
When you were in power also, the price of, you see, let's be clear.
Look, I'm a tomato fan.
Inflation
price of onions also went up under BJP.
Inflation wasn't discovered in 2014. You see, the problem with having politicians from either side is you give a very partisan perspective. When I give these figures about income inequalities, this is a reality that has existed in this country for 7 decades.
No, it's actually got worse, Raj. These are measurable facts and figures. In fact, I'd like to know why the government... No, you can measure it. Inequality is worse in our country. It's also happened to China. Inequality is bad in China too. So it's not as if we are unique. but we do have rising inequality, and all the figures have shown this. One of the worries we have is that suddenly the government hasn't been conducting some of the statistical operations that give us reliable data, that used to give us reliable data. We haven't had a census for the first time since 1841. There hasn't been a census in this decade so far. And we wonder when and if it's going to be, because now we hear it won't be till after the general elections. We don't have a number of the statistical exercises. We don't even have a chief statistician. He's been fired. So we're worried a little bit about the reliability of the figures. But inasmuch as the experts can estimate with accurate numbers, we are doing worse on the yardstick that you asked about, which is inequality. We're doing worse on poverty. We're doing worse on hunger. The Global Hunger Index is considered a widely reliable figure. Our rates have dropped there. In other words, child malnutrition has gone up, and particularly in so-called prosperous states like Gujarat, the figures are shocking. And you're looking at a situation where these numbers are bad. I believe very much in painting a picture of hope and optimism, because that's basically who I am. The proverbial glass being half full and half empty, I prefer to see it not only as half full, but as refillable. We've got to be able to try better. We haven't got it right. We've got to be able to fill that glass up. So I want to say to all of you, I want you to have a better future. But we're not going to get there until we look at the reality of the present time.
Okay, let me turn therefore to another reality of the present time. We've got a young audience here, many of whom, like you, might want to get into public life. And then they see a figure brought out by the Association of Democratic Reforms a few months ago, that 44% of our legislators of state assemblies across the country, 1,777 of them, have declared criminal cases against them. Why should the young join public life and politics if they are surrounded by criminals and if criminalization of politics is so rewarding?
So they can reduce the number.
So I don't think Shashi ji and I look like criminals, do we?
No, you don't, but you're surrounded by them. There are people around you who seem to benefit.
Rajdeep, let me just explain that number a little bit. Because I myself, and I'm sure Shashi ji has been also similarly afflicted. What happens is that when you have a government, for example, that is from an opposing party, that government makes it very difficult for you to do what you would ordinarily want to do in a democracy, that is, do processions, demonstrations, strikes, and so on. And in many of those situations, when we do those things, we have cases that are brought against us. And that often results in situations where members of parliament, members of legislative assemblies end up having a large number of cases against them because they are undertaking democratic actions, they are exercising their democratic privileges. So there is quite a bit of noise in those numbers that we have to strip.
No, sure, let me strip the noise. If you're saying that, some of them could be criminal cases which are foisted upon by opposition or for minor charges, the fact is 25% of these are serious criminal cases. In terms of serious criminal cases, the BJP, your party, had the highest number because you have the maximum MLAs, 337. That's 25% of the total MLAs with charges. Congress not too far behind Dr. Tharoor, don't worry, 194, 27%. Trinamool Congress was 77, 34%. These are serious criminal cases. Some of them even have charges, rape, murder, among others. Why should any young person join politics if A, there's criminalization, and let me add to that, money politics. The ADR report points out increasingly you need to be a crorepati several times over to contest elections, and your assets seem to multiply the moment you're in government. So I want to understand, why should the young then join politics?
So Rajiv, the answer to that question is, come on in. We need young people like you who are idealistic, who are motivated, who are energetic to join politics, to bring a different look to politicians. And if we have people like you, if people are committed to serving the nation, people are willing to work for our fellow citizens, we can change some of these facts, we can change some of these statistics. The fact is, we really need good people to be in public service. We need more good people to come and join. It's very, very hard. And many people will prefer a well-paying career or a better lifestyle lifestyle to being in public service. But unless we get the most talented, the most idealistic people willing to take on these hard challenges like Shashi ji has done, leaving aside a fantastic career as a diplomat, unless we bring in people like Shashi ji and others and like yourselves into public service, these are the kinds of numbers that we will find difficult to turn around. So we must do that. And I, of course, tell people that don't do it too soon. Make sure that as far as you are concerned, you are able to discharge your responsibilities as a family person, as a husband, as a father, and so on. But once you can do that, I myself joined public service at the age of 51. I didn't do it when I was 31. I didn't do it when I was 41. I did it when I was 51 years old, and I felt that I had been able to look after my family, and then I could come and serve the nation.
So what you're saying is you've got to be financially secure before you enter public life, otherwise you will make money through politics.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is, Rajdeep, you know, you have to couple, along with idealism, you have to couple that with being practical.
Okay.
Being practical, and if you do that, yes, you can make a very big difference.
Dr. Tharoor, do you really think it's possible, given the entry barriers that are there for lots of young idealistic people who may want to contribute in public life, but look around them and see, sadly, people with possible criminal backgrounds who made their money illegally, entering public life and being rewarded for it?
True, but you can also see the giants of this world who've given up very, very well-paid careers, international lifestyle to come into politics also. So there are models you can look at that are different from the criminals and the thugs, and unfortunately, those will be there as long as people are prepared to vote for them.
Now,
but that's precisely
are the two of you exceptions and not the rule?
Perhaps, but then we need more exceptions. Then the rule will change if there are enough exceptions. I just want to say one more thing. You know, I've sometimes met kids your age, usually those just coming out of high school, and sometimes they say to me, "Sir, we are not interested in politics." And you know what I tell them? Well, I'm sorry, because politics is interested in you. If you are not interested in politics, you're abdicating that field to others who are the ones going to take the decisions that will affect your lives, that will decide what possibilities you have for your future study, whether you can go outside your state or go abroad, whether you can even afford to go to college. It's those people that are making decisions that will tell you what choices you have available to you in life, what are the things you can and cannot do, as we've discovered a little earlier in this conversation. It's those people who will expand your realm of possibilities or narrow it and constrain it. You, therefore, need to be interested in politics so the kinds of people and attitudes and values you like come into politics and get enough victories that they can actually shape the policies that will do you good. That's why I feel, don't ever say I'm not interested in politics. You may not want to come full-time into politics, and I happen to agree with Jayant, because we both joined politics at the age of 51, except I did it a bit earlier. It's simply that unfortunately, all of us, when we are young, we're ready to take risks, we have the energy, we have the idealism, but very often we also have responsibilities around the corner, lurking with a sandbag to hit us on the head, and therefore, if we have to fulfill those responsibilities, first, we have to pay attention to the needs of that, and as Jayant said, that means taking care of your responsibilities, ensuring that when you come into politics, you aren't coming into it to see how much you can get out of it, but rather how much you can give to it. Now, he and I have come in the spirit of wanting to give, and we came in at a stage of our lives when we felt that we didn't need to grubbily take anybody's money under the table in order to meet our needs. And therefore, for us, it's all about the ideas, it's about the issues, it's debating certain principles. It's not about making money. And I would say to you, if you need to make money because you come from a humble background, do another profession, study hard, become a doctor, become a lawyer, become an accountant, be a banker, do whatever you can, make your money, and come into politics when you don't need anything from it. That's the kind of politician we need in this country.
I'm going to, for a moment, step back, because this is a wonderful young audience of 60% of this country is under the age of 30, and we are getting younger by the year. So I'm going to give you a chance over the next 10 minutes to ask questions. There's a mic somewhere out there. So you just have to look at the mic. The young man there is already itching to ask a question. What's your name? Give your name and ask your question. Keep your question a short one. Yeah, go ahead. He flashed the mobile light first to show that he was out there. That's an intelligent way of attracting me.
Hello.
Okay, go ahead. What's your name?
Yes, my name is Siddharth Mohanty, and I have two questions to ask, one to Dr. Tharoor and the other to Jayant Sinha. So let's start with the question to Mr. Sinha. In your arguments, you repeatedly highlighted the importance of respecting the Constitution as well as its provisions, which is also another way of saying to respect democracy. But at the same time, shouldn't it be worrying to our nation that India has been under a constant state of democratic backsliding since Narendra Modi was elected PM?
I wouldn't agree with that at all. I would say that, as the Honorable Prime Minister did on his first day of coming to Parliament, is that he bows before the temple of democracy, and he said very clearly that the Constitution is my holy book. I know for a fact that all of our senior leaders are committed to democracy, they're committed to the Constitution, and those are the absolute principles that we always follow.
But when you say that, and this is in response to something that Dr. Tharoor said, that he gave the example of a young Hindu-Muslim family who were planning to leave the country or were worried that their child was being asked about his or her religion in school. How would you react to that? What would you tell that child? That there's a constitution of this country that Dr. Ambedkar gave us. Don't worry, you'll be okay. It's just a book. They want reality. These youngsters want you to walk the talk. If these youngsters read about misuse of agencies, targeting of opponents, the fact that our institutions are seen to be compromised, how do you expect them to remain idealistic?
Rajdeep, those are very good questions, and of course we are asked those questions every day in our constituencies with the people that we interact with. And let me assure everyone, you are protected by the Constitution, you are protected by us because we are committed to your freedom, to your liberty, and to your constitutional rights. So you're fully protected by us. And whether it is, our state governments or whether it is our national government, we have always honestly and truthfully followed the Constitution. And for those that believe that the Constitution is not being protected, it's being violated in any way, the Supreme Court has a very powerful instrument that you can use, which is a public interest litigation. As far as the constitutional rights are concerned that you have, anytime you believe your fundamental human rights are being violated, you can go directly to the Supreme Court and file a PIL to that regard.
Okay. What's your question to Dr. Tharoor?
Yes, for my second question, to point out something in both of your arguments, you praised one of the provisions of the Constitution which allows according to you, to allow the people to choose who and whom they wish to marry. However, as we all know, the Supreme versus Union case earlier this year did not release a proper verdict regarding the legalization of same-sex marriage. And one can say that the influence of both parties, both BJP and Congress, influenced this. With BJP obviously doing their usual, it violates our religion, culture and traditions. And then we have Congress, which continues its streak of not doing anything. It's stating that there are more.
Okay.
And Congress,
I'll just
shorten it.
Go on.
And Congress, which continues its streak of not doing anything, stating that there are more important issues to handle than gay marriage. Now, in Congress's words, does more important issues constitute Rahul Gandhi getting new beard styles and running a marathon under the name of Jodo India?
Okay. By the way, I think in the course of this debate, we have found a good young moderator and a future politician. But let's be very clear. Before I come to Dr. Tharoor,
moderator?
yeah, before I come to Dr. Tharoor, I want a show of hands. How many of this audience actually believes that the Supreme Court should legislate and allow, if people want to have same-sex marriages, they should be allowed? I hope you're watching Mr. Sinha and Dr. Tharoor.
Absolutely.
Our politicians may be behind the time. This is South Mumbai, of course, but you want to respond to him?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the young gentleman, Siddharth, may not realize that I am the only MP who tried twice to get Section 377 of the Penal Code decriminalized. That is, that prohibited homosexual relationships and lesbian relationships by saying that they were against the order of nature. I tried, and it was Mr. Jayant Sinha's party that twice opposed the introduction of my bill and voted it down twice. So, and let me say, they did so with some very salacious and petty remarks, which I won't dignify by repeating in front of all of you, but that was the attitude taken, at which point I advised some of the petitioners in what became the very famous case that turned the tables, that the only way you're going to do this, as long as the BJP has a majority in our parliament, you'll have to go the court, the judicial route. And that's what they did, and they finally got it decriminalized by the Supreme Court. Now this larger issue of same-sex marriage is there. As far as I'm concerned, I recognize that my stand is a minority one, that even in my party there'll be many who disagree with me. My argument is, if their disagreement is based on an emotional word like marriage, many countries have gone through an intermediate stage of a civil contract kind of arrangement. The most important thing is that in a loving relationship between two people, that the dearest person to you should have the kinds of rights that in a heterosexual marriage a spouse would have. And those rights, if you're not able to bring it in through the word marriage, bring it in through a civil society, a civil or social partnership contract, which can easily be done under the Special Marriages Act, provided the court allows it for people irrespective of their gender. So there are solutions possible. I cannot speak about Rahul Gandhi's beard. I think he looks pretty good, clean-shaven, but, you know, there are others who have different views. But I can tell you that as far as the Congress Party is concerned, we are free to express our own opinions. And even though there was no agreed party position on what I did it not just once, but twice in the House. And to this point, nobody ever said, why are you doing this from my party? So we can stand up for what we believe in. We just have to have the political courage to do that. It may not work, but it's worth trying.
Good question. You know, but before I move to the next question, let me just ask both of you. Mr. Jain Sinha, if there's a view that Mr. Narendra Modi has and you don't agree with it, can you go up to him and say, Mr. Prime Minister, I don't agree with you?
Absolutely. We have the ability within the party to have very open discussions on many important and sensitive topics. And of course, we discuss and debate most of these important issues in that fashion. And if you have a different point of view, you can express it with the senior leadership of the party. But once the party has an official line, then of course, we follow the official line. But within the party, of course, you have any number of opportunities to express your views.
Is that an honest answer?
Yes, absolutely.
Or a politically correct answer?
No, it's an absolutely honest answer. I myself have met with the senior leadership on many occasions and had long discussions on many important topics.
Okay. Dr. Tharoor, can you disagree and say, Rahul Gandhi, I don't agree with you? And still survive in the Congress party?
Yes. No, we've also had conversations at various times about issues on which we didn't necessarily see eye to eye. But I think it's more challenging when you're in power, because disagreements when you're in opposition essentially are theoretical or idea-based. When you're in power, they're about policy decisions that you can make or not make. And that's the kind of thing where I hope that what Jayan says actually translates into people who currently seem to be impervious to other people's opinions actually receiving a few and getting them done.
You know, I'm going to ask for shorter answers. Let's get, there was a young, yes ma'am, in the red. Go ahead.
My name is Shreya, and I have a question about an issue which was sadly not discussed in the debate.
Yes.
I think everybody over here is very well aware of the recent Manipur violence that happened with women. And I would like to ask, and during the debate, safety net was mentioned and everybody was talking about safety, better India. I want to ask, what actions is the government currently taking on the safety of women? And I'm asking this as a person who travels in the local train every single day and faces issues. What action is
Do you
government
feel
taking?
you travel by train every day?
Yes.
In Mumbai?
Yes.
Do you feel safe in the train or not?
No.
You don't?
Because no matter where I am, no matter which section of the train I am, in the female first class or the men first class, actually it's like the general first class. That is where I travel. I come across people and I don't feel safe. I never feel safe in the train because I always have to be alert, as if I'm in a war or something like that.
Okay.
I always have to be alert and be careful about my surroundings and what's happening.
So what's your question?
My question is, what actions is the government taking so that us, women and girls, don't have to be so alert on the time like we're on the battlefield?
Fair enough. Very, very good question. Very, very good question. Who wants to take it out of the two of you?
I'm not for the government. He's going to defend his government.
No. 1 minute.
That was the question.
It's very interesting. This country has been ruled by you and you. But women are still feeling unsafe in 2023. Mr. Sinha.
You're exactly right, Shreya, and it's a terrible tragedy that our mothers, sisters, daughters, everybody feels so unsafe in India, and particularly in northern India. I think it's a terrible, terrible tragedy. Shashi and I have lived around the world, and I can tell you the kind of oppression that women feel in India cannot be compared anywhere around the world. The physical violence, the kind of way in which women are treated, it is absolutely ghastly, and I'm completely and totally against that. Now, of course, there are many, many laws that have been passed in Parliament, in legislative assemblies and so on to protect women. The Honorable Home Minister just introduced yesterday in Parliament a complete revision of our criminal procedures, our penal code, etc. And as he correctly said, the first section deals with women and children because it's so important to give them safety and security. So we are passing the laws. Unfortunately, and this is where, again, as elected representatives representing millions of people in our constituencies, we have to be alert and vigilant. The laws are there. The police stations are there. We have to make sure that every woman, every lady, every person feels secure every step along their commute, along their travel. And that can only happen if local policing works well. So we have to work with our local police, we have to work with people in the thanas, we have to work with people on the patrols, and they have to absolutely be vigilant to make sure that all of our daughters and sisters and friends feel absolutely safe. And at the end of the day, it is our responsibility as men also to make sure that all of you are safe and protected at all times. Otherwise, it's a terrible tragedy for India. This is a shameful thing that we absolutely need to address.
We need to educate our boys.
Just a minute. I have in the audience Dr. Kiran Bedi. Dr. Bedi, you've been a trend-setting policewoman. I want the mic to be given to her. Tell us this. This is a question being asked by young women today in Mumbai. Think about a young woman in any part of the country, perhaps even less protected. What is your message to the netas when young women feel unsafe in this country, even in a city like Mumbai?
Thank you. Thank you, Rajdeep. I think you know my answer. I've said this all the time in your debates. Every child is born where? Girl or a boy, where does he begin his grooming? Where does he begin his grooming? Is he born a criminal? He becomes a criminal. Why aren't women becoming criminals? Why are some of the boys becoming like that? Where is it beginning? The problem is, friends, in my mind, with humility, is parenting. Is the responsibility of the mothers and the fathers of their daughters and sons. Unless every family, every home doesn't take care of what they're bringing up, and then it comes back to the school. Two people are responsible for crimes against women, this primarily, where it's not getting stemmed. One is homes, where the girls are controlled and the boys are decontrolled. Girls are being restrained and being felt insecure कि बाहर नहीं जाना, और लड़के को कहना है जब मर्जी आना रात को. ये तो नहीं है. लड़की के लिए rules एक है. The one set of rules for girls. Problem, friends, therefore to be short and brief, because I'm not the panelist. But I'm very anguished. Anguish it's a social responsibility. And social responsibility begins from homes. And also begins with social leaders, who are also the spokespersons. And it also begins with the media. Most of the time, and Rajdeep and I have had a debate, and every time there was a saying, I said, go back to parents. Find out whose child is this boy. Go back to the school. Whose student is it? Unless you identify failed students, failed teachers, failed parents, failed villages. Even panchayats have a very important responsibility. Municipal committees also have a responsibility. We can't put it only on the police. Because police can handle how much? 2%? 3%? But not 70%. Not 70%.
Okay.
So it goes back to parenting.
If there's one 30-second message that you would give this one audience, I was hoping someone would speak on environment and clean air, which I hope will be the big challenge for the future, for the next 30 years. How do we ensure cleaner air for our young citizens? But what is that one thing, the India of your dreams? 30 seconds for this young audience. What's your message to inspire them? What's that one big challenge you think they have? Jayant Sinha, 30 seconds. Shashi Tharoor, 30 seconds.
Thousands of years of human history have taught us that freedom and liberty, which answers your question as well, which is everybody has the right to practice the religion they want, live the life they want. Freedom and liberty are the most essential qualities that enable countries to prosper and progress. And that's what we have to safeguard in India. We have to give you all the freedom and liberty to do what you want. We have to enable companies to thrive. We have to enable societies to thrive. And societies and human beings flourish when we create the conditions for freedom and liberty. And that's what's enshrined in our Constitution. That's what I believe in.
How many of you young people want clean air as one of your top priorities? Okay, there again you're seeing same-sex marriage, lots of hands raised. Clean air, lots of hands raised. I hope politicians will speak on these issues.
Well,
yes.
On clean air, as an MP, I've been running a round table at my own initiative for the last 8 years, calling in officials, stakeholders, MPs, doctors, experts to combat it, to advocate for a clean air policy and to implement it. So, I'm already sold on this one.
And I moved the private member bill for net zero, by the way, which is also...
But let me come back to this question that you raised. What lays us low in our society is one set of people saying that the others have no right to be who they are and that if they can't be like us, we're going to beat them on the head. That's the most dangerous attitude possible in a democracy like ours, especially in a diverse country like ours. So learn acceptance, learn mutual respect, learn to live together, learn not to judge. If we can tell ourselves that we are not necessarily superior to the other person, we are different, they are different, we can learn from them, they can learn from us, and we can live together, we will create a great India in 2047.
Ladies and gentlemen, what we've seen over the last hour or so is what really is that great Indian idea of samvad. This wasn't so much a debate as two proud Indian citizens in public life exchanging their viewpoints. And the best thing I liked was this young audience, which was full of questions, which applauded at the right time and was not convinced at others. So long as this young India remains as vibrant as you do, I think this country will do well. I hope that in the future, many of you will contribute in your own small way or large way to public life. Most of all, I wish each and every one of you be good citizens, happy Independence Day, and celebrate the idea of India and being Indian. So thank you all very much for joining us here. Thank you. Give yourselves a very big hand, and both Shashi Tharoor and Jayant Sinha. Give them a very big hand.